All right, what is up, everybody? Mags and Slabs, episode 10. I'm Brad from Sports Magazines and History, and as usual, I've got with me Mike from Slabs to Men. Mike, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. Hope everyone had a great holiday.
And as you may have seen, we've got a special guest with us tonight. The Godfather, the GOAT, whatever you want to refer to him as, our good friend, CGC Sports Illustrated, Jim Kehoe. Jim, thanks so much for hopping on here with us tonight.
Bradley, Mike, I hope you guys are doing great. I hope you had a good Christmas. Happy New Year to you guys and everybody. And thank you very much for having me on. I'm a big fan of what you guys have done and started here with these videos the last several months. So I'm excited and happy that you guys asked me to be a part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. We're pumped to have you. Um,
I
so
wanted to I wanted
yeah,
to say real quick that it's especially great to have you here, Jim. For me, you're the one that got me interested in for the very first video that I saw of yours. And then we had that fun conversation on the phone. You convinced me this was worth a go. I've been loving it ever since. And then got to meet Brad, and same thing, just continued. So I want to thank you guys.
Hey, no problem. And it was great, Mike, for you and I to meet in person at the National this
Oh,
year.
yeah,
We
absolutely.
had I think that's always a good judge of the growth and strength of this hobby is the National as I go to it every year, because in years past, it's usually been me and maybe one or two other guys. And we had a really great contingent this year, and I expect for 2024 it'll even be a bigger contingent. Yeah, looking forward to that as well.
so I see we've already got a few people hopping in on the chat, which is great. And let me just say, if any of you have questions, especially for Jim, feel free to throw them in there. And as we roll along, I'll try and pick some spots where I can throw those questions out at Jim. We've got 4 topics planned for tonight, and Jim's going to be with us for the first 2. So once again, if you want to take advantage of him while he's on here with us, then drop something in the chat and we'll try and get to all of those. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into our first topic for tonight. And, we're heading into the new year. And in my opinion, this has been a monster year for the hobby. A lot of things have been going on. And so we're going to recap. We're going to recap some of the key events and just share some thoughts. And Mike, I'm going to go ahead and unshare my screen and pass it to you because I know you've got a really nice graphic you put together sharing the timeline um, for the year in review. So go ahead, Mike, you take it over.
Sure. Yeah, I'm just going to kind of go through these quickly, and then we can just jump in and talk about everything. Um, so March of this year, 2023, new and improved CGC holders for magazines were introduced from CGC. March 3rd, 64 Kofax goes for a record price. April, CGC grading turnaround times are drastically reduced. The Nintendo Power Sale. The Will Chamberlain first cover sale. CGC offers images for graded books. Go Collect launches magazine price guide. And then also, who could forget the 1984 SI MJ first pro cover sale, CGC 9.8 that goes for a record 126,000.
Yeah, so once again, Mike, nice job putting that timeline together. Those are just a few of the highlights that we picked out that we thought were really kind of key moments this year in the hobby. And Jim, we want to start off with you. Touch on any or all of these things that happened this year. You've been in this hobby longer than both of us, and so I think that you have some good points of reference to compare some of these previous years and what you've seen and what you've experienced in the hobby versus 2023. So just kind of share with us your thoughts about the overall year in the hobby and maybe some of these key events that took place.
Yeah, I will. And Mike, a nice job on that PowerPoint. I'm a little bit of a PowerPoint aficionado, so I appreciated that. That one was rock solid. I think it was a really strong year, and let's take a step back to kind of to appreciate for all that got accomplished this year. Look at some other verticals in the collectible hobby, but also look as to where this has come from. So you can pull some data, and I think as recently as 2018 or 2019, which wasn't that long ago in some ways with everything that's happened in the last 5 years. It may seem like 20 or 30 years ago, but in the last 5 years, 5 years ago, CGC was grading maybe a couple of thousand magazine slabs a year. And now if you pull the data, and I haven't pulled it recently, but you're going to be seeing, tens and tens and tens of thousands of slabs being graded. So I think that shows just the absolute health and growth of the hobby. Obviously, those record sale prices, it's interesting. I did a video in January of this year where I laid out some predictions for the hobby, and almost all of them were dead wrong. Which is fine because it's just fun to do that anyway. But one of my predictions that was dead wrong was I didn't think that we were going to see a record sale price for a Sports Illustrated this year, and I was absolutely wrong, because not only did we have a record sale price, we had 3 of them, and records were just being shattered. I mean, the Koufax barely squeaked out the record. I think the previous record was around 30,000 before that, and then you've got that price doubling with the Wilt sale, and then another double on top of that with the MJ sale in August. So I think the hobby, Mike, you laid it out, a lot of huge milestones. Let's not forget how important those upgraded magazine slabs were. Yeah. We have been complaining about it for years. Comics got their upgrade years ago. We've been waiting for the magazines to come around, and it's been huge. Now you're still going to get a cracked slab every now and then, but my failure rate has gone from probably 10 to 15% down to maybe 1 or 2% on the slabs that I'm seeing. And again, that's just anecdotal. That's my information. So I think those slabs were really important. Obviously, the sale prices were important. The turnaround times, another huge one. When I started in this hobby, you could get, and this is 2018, 2019, your turnaround time was 2 or 3 months, 60 days. And it was great. And people complained about it back then. Oh, 60 days, that's outrageous. And then in the height of COVID, we were looking at 1.5 years, borderline 2 years for wait times. So for CGC to do a good job and get it down to 30 business days, it's really been a game changer for the hobby. And it's changed the hobby a lot, because what you've seen, I think, is you've seen obviously a flood of inventory into the market. There's just been so many slabs graded, and that's put a downward pressure on some pricing, especially mid-level and low-level things. The prices have gone down even more on those, just because of the volume of slabs that are out there in the marketplace right now. But those were 2 big things. And then with Go Collect coming on board for a pricing guide, and that was really the fact that there were no comps, long-term comps, because eBay, you can pull data from TerraPeak, but most people don't know how to do that. eBay keeps the basic sales for 90 days. It just wasn't enough. And I think it gave the new collector a lot of, it was just created a lot of friction in the hobby, because you had these new collectors that were worried that they were going to be overpaying. So Go Collect coming on board with that pricing guide just removed an incredible amount of friction in the marketplace. And so I think it's been a really strong year, as you alluded to, Bradley. It's been a really strong year on top of previous strong years. And what I'm getting at with all of this is, I think it is really healthy for this hobby that we've seen this nice, slow, steady year after year growth, but nothing crazy, stupid, explosive. Because I think you saw that in some other verticals, and graded VHS comes to mind immediately. That vertical had this meteoric rise where prices for everything went through the roof, and then it all came crashing down really hard. And I'd hate to see that to this hobby. I'd much rather be the slow, steady, rock solid year after year growth hobby, as opposed to the one that's a flash in a pan and then it gets washed out and it's really having trouble. It's struggling and recovering. And I think you can also look at some of the other major categories as well. I mean, I know you guys follow sports cards, and sport card sale prices have taken a bit of a hit, but what's gotten hit much worse have been the comic side of things. There are huge chunks of the comic book pricing world that are underwater compared to 2019. I mean, obviously, every collectible saw this massive upswing in pricing and interest during COVID, but there are huge chunks of the comic book world that where prices are below pre-COVID levels.
Right. For the most part, sports cards are still above pre-COVID.
Yeah, and there's going to be outliers in all this. Keep in mind, I don't want people, you obviously give us specific examples where the generalities don't necessarily fit, but we're talking about big, broad generalities here. And you're right, sports cards have come down off their peaks, but they're hanging in there. I don't want to be the guy that paid $4 million for that Luka Doncic, RPA a couple of years ago. That's worth maybe 25% of that now. So there's always going to be the outliers. The comics have really kind of taken it on the chin, from best I can see, worse than any of the others. And so for our hobby to sit here and say, okay, yeah, we got some pricing pressure, we're still crushing it on the top end. The ultra premium pieces, and this is true for almost all the hobbies, are still going to be driving those prices forward, and we're seeing that. But the mid-level stuff and the mid to high level stuff, we've held our pricing a lot better than a lot of other verticals. So I think it was a very good year. It was a very good year on top of previous good years, and I like where this hobby compares to all of the volatility that so many other hobbies have had. That was a long-winded answer. Sorry about that. We're off to a long night. If that's the way I'm answering all your questions, guys. Sorry.
Jim, that's what we do. We ramble about sports magazines on here. So
right.
You're in your safe space right here, okay? And I just want to say, and Mike, I'm gonna pass it to you in just a second to get your thoughts on the year, but that's such a great point that I think you just made about comparing a few of those other spaces and how they had kind of meteoric rises and meteoric crashes. I honestly hadn't really thought of it like that. And I think that's where you bring in such a better long range perspective than definitely what I have, because I'm really just now getting close to maybe 2 years in the hobby. And when I first got into it, you already had videos that were 2 years old. So I know that, you've seen this from a longer range. And that's such a good point that, just once again, I think because of my still somewhat freshness in the hobby, I hadn't even thought about. You're right. We've seen a lot of growth in this hobby, but it hasn't been explosive. And like you said, VHS, or I feel like I saw that with video game grading.
Absolutely. I don't think it's been as serious with video games as VHS, but graded video games have had their struggles as well, as far as maintaining interest and pricing.
Yeah, it's like some of those collectibles were all the rage, and you're seeing some huge prices, and then just all of a sudden, like nothing, like totally dropped out, bottom dropped out. And it's not been like that at all. So I think you made an awesome point about that, and I think that I agree with you. That would show, I think, positive signs for the hobby. I still think there are a couple things that could happen in this hobby that would maybe create a huge explosive spike, but it just feels like it's kind of a slow snowball of momentum, and that does make it feel like it's a little more healthier long term. But Mike, let me throw it at you, and any of these, key events that you want to touch on, or respond to what Jim had to say.
Well, I know that we're going to talk about the hobby going forward, but I still feel like we're at the tipping point still, where it's only going to take a small percentage of new interest to really make things push so much further, like price wise, just because of the pop count still being so low for some of these older newsstand magazines. So I don't think that it would take a huge influx to just see the needle move. But if that does happen, I think that we'll definitely see that happen. A big price jump there, potentially. Yeah, I think that since I've come in, which has been about a year and a half or so, um, just the volume of people that have shown like new interest in this has been obvious. And as Jim mentioned, with like the new submissions pushing up so much further, that's evidence of that. And
Guys,
yeah.
Let me throw in one more point, because I think that it's important to make it. It kind of goes along the line of what you're talking about, Mike, as far as growth goes. I did a recent data poll about just generic Sports Illustrated graded magazine sales on eBay, and I just wanted to look at a count. And so I pulled back the last 90 days, and in the last 90 days on eBay, there have been almost 1,000. It was like 930 or 970 graded Sports Illustrateds had sold on eBay. That's ridiculous, because I guarantee you 2 years ago, if I had done the exact same poll and looked at a 3-month or 90-day time period, it probably would have been less than 100 that would have sold. Because so we've gone from a volume standpoint on eBay of a couple a week to dozens per week being sold. And I think that's just another solid, not anecdotal. It's an objective data point showing about the velocity and the volume of sales that we're seeing in the hobby.
Yeah, that's strong.
Yeah,
Those are strong
I
numbers.
still think we're attracting a lot of people that like the idea of finding them in the wild and turning them into gold, afterwards, after they grade it. I think that's still it's a big factor of attractiveness. So I don't know,
Yeah, and Mike, I think you're probably gonna continue to see that play out exactly like that as long as there's money for it. Because I mean, as much as I try and focus on the collector aspect and set the investing and money part aside because I think it's too easy to get caught up into that. As long as I can buy a magazine for $15 and I can spend $25 to get it graded and I'm in for $40 and I can sell it for $70, you're gonna see that people are just gonna be buying raw magazines. Now I think you're seeing that spread shrink dramatically. For example, if you're getting an ultra modern, issue, something in the last 5 or 6 years graded, and you're not able to get something of a 9.0 or better at the very minimum on it, you're likely losing money, especially if you're paying to get it pressed as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's, you are starting to see some of that a little bit, but it's funny because one of my favorite sports cards content creators I've talked about on my channel before is Chris Sewell, baseball card collector or whatever, investor dealer, and he just posted a video the other day where he was looking at how there's such an explosion in grading, and I think he pulled up the numbers on eBay, and there'd been like 600 or so sports cards sold just within the past however long, like it was probably the 90-day window on eBay that sold for less than the cost of grading. And so he's sitting here, he's asking like, why are people sending these in to be graded? It's like it is so oversaturated almost with the number of cards that are being graded. Like all these slabbed cards are being sold for $1, $5, $12 when the cheapest you could even send a single card in to be graded was $19. I still am seeing very, very few slabbed issues of Sports Illustrated sell for less than $25. There's
Agreed.
there's a few, but it's not much. There's definitely no level of saturation yet, like we see with sports cards, which I wouldn't expect it to be like that. Um, Let me go ahead and throw one question at you, Jim, and then we'll hop back over to this topic. But I've
Yeah.
I've been trying to keep note of some of these questions rolling in. Someone asked, if you are going to get a key subscription issue graded, what's the minimum grade that would make it wanted by other collectors?
It's a good question, and I understand where you're coming from. And the answer is, with so many questions I get asked, is it depends. I think if you've got a subscription issue of Mickey Mantle's first cover from 1956, I'd get any condition graded, and it doesn't matter because I think there's so few of them, and the demand is so high. So it really depends on trying to think out how I can at least give this person an answer that's worth something other than just it depends. If you're talking about modern subscription issues, look, I for the most part, I think there's maybe 30 or 40 subscription issues in the entire 70-year run of Sports Illustrated that probably makes sense to get graded right now. Do you want to, and the most modern one, and I don't spend a lot of time thinking about subscription issues. It might be LeBron's first cover from 2002. So let's use that as an example. And again, I don't follow subscriptions that much, but I keep an eye on things and I see some sales that take place. If you've got a LeBron subscription issue, first cover from 2002, you're probably going to need something along the lines of a 9.4 or higher for it to be worth your while. Probably going to be the same for a Tiger first cover and Kobe first cover, all of those kind of really premium pieces from the same era there. Now, as you go back further, you're going to be able to get away with a lower grade. If you want a Michael Jordan first cover from 1983, you can probably get away with a 6 on that issue. But again, this isn't all about era. This is all about the star as well. So if you give me, a Magic Johnson random cover from the '80s that's a subscription issue, you're probably going to need a 9.4 or better on that one, maybe a 9.6 or a 9.8 to be able to do anything with it. So there's too many factors for me to give you a firm answer on that. It depends on when the issue came out. It depends on who the star is, and it depends on the collectibility of that issue, really. There's a lot of factors that go into it.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I think that there's maybe 5 or so I've identified that would be worth grading at just about any grade. I was actually really surprised to see the other day a Michael Jordan first cover, 1983 with North Carolina, subscription with the label still on, 2.0, sold for $52.
There you go.
That's still above the price of grading. So I mean, I guess
Yep.
depending on how much you bought the magazine raw for, but that's telling me that if you've just got a beat to hell copy of Michael Jordan's first cover sitting in your stack, grade it and you probably could still flip it for, $20 or so. So, I
That's one of
think
the few covers that transcends
one of
to
the
be
very
outside
few.
of.
Yeah, I think the Michael Jordan first cover, the Michael Jordan Star is Born, the Mickey Mantle first cover, probably the Muhammad Ali first cover, maybe like a
Yep.
Larry Bird. I mean, I think you're really limited to some of those very few that would be that seem to still have enough desirability at just about any grade, even if it's a subscription. But once you get beyond those elite, I agree with Jim. I think there's just so many factors to take into consideration. Who's on the cover, what era it's in. I think modern, almost none of the printed subscriptions, which would be like 95 on or so.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be almost none that, unless you think you're going to pop a nine. I think a 9.8 in just about anything you could have collectability, but man, it's
Agreed.
it's really tough. There's a lot of variability on all those factors.
Kind of feel
Yeah.
like we sort of did morphed into the next topic, which basically organically long-term collectability of magazines. Um, I one thing that does bother me a little bit is that these things are as large as they are sometimes. We both know, all three of us know that all of us know that it takes a lot of storage. Once you start going with some of this, and also a thing with cards that is attractive to a lot of people is how mobile they are, and you can trade them easily. These Zion cases that people bring to shows, and they could just break out the cards and throw them on the table and start wheeling and dealing with their friend. I wish that we had something that can accommodate our magazine slabs in that way. That can, it's almost like when people have like these cards, it's like currency. It's like they have like this money that they can kind of like wheel and deal with. Um, it's just a kind of a random thought there, but that is something that is a little bit of an obstacle sometimes with the magazines.
Yeah, look, there's always going to be pros and cons, and there's going to be differences between us and sports cards and the other hobbies and verticals out there. And there are going to be things that are better about magazines and things that are worse about magazines. And yeah, the
Sure.
sizing is a challenge, although comics have been able to manage that pretty well. Now, comics aren't quite as big as our magazines, but there are people out there, lots of people out there with 1,000+ collections of graded comics. But the sizing is both a pro and con. It does get pretty big once you start getting up into some sizable numbers for your own personal collection or just to have on hand for storage. But I think the flip side of that is it displays so much better. And I think that helps out with collectability. I mean, the display of sports cards stinks. They're tiny little things that just don't display well. And so I think there's pros and cons to the size that are out there. But it's a good point, Mike.
I think another pro, Jim, because I agree, Mike. I mean, the volume is difficult to manage at times. I'm getting to the point where that's a challenge for me. But I think a big pro in that aspect is I'm able to focus my collection so much more easily with my graded magazines than I am with my cards. With my cards, there's such a volume that I kind of feel like sometimes they get lost in the shuffle. And, like if I wanted to get a whole, I could never possibly get like every Kobe Bryant card that there is, my favorite athlete, but that's pretty attainable with the magazines. And, I feel like I can appreciate my best magazine slabs almost a little bit better than I can my sports cards, just because the volume of sports cards, it just, there's so many, and like I said, they kind of get they get buried in the shuffle. But I don't know,
No problem.
I find myself appreciating my magazines more because in a lot of cases they're kind of they can be more expensive sometimes, they're larger, and I don't know, it just that's just kind of something I've noticed. My focus as far as my collectability seems to be a little bit better with the magazines.
Yeah, and that might be another thing that kind of leads it more to collectors as opposed to like people that are just trying to like do flipping as much. One problem that we'll never have is breaking open a box of you know 36 packs of magazines and having 500 magazines we don't want. Sorry, we have to like think of how we're going to get rid of. Like that's how baseball card world. You can end up with thousands and thousands of cards you don't even want, because you just opened up a couple boxes. Magazines is not. They just don't work that way. Luckily.
Yeah, and I think that's very much related to one of the questions that was put in the chat. They asked, now that Sports Illustrateds are produced monthly, do you feel that this will negatively affect bringing in new collectors to the hobby? Jim, what do you think about that one?
Yeah, I think it will a little bit. And all of these things that we're talking about, nothing is 100% or zero. It's not black or white. It's all gray. Yeah, do I wish Sports Illustrated was producing weekly issues? Yeah, we'd have more first covers. We'd have more big athletes with big stars on covers, and it would be better for the hobby. So yes, I wish they were producing weekly instead of monthly, but I don't think it's that big of a detraction either. Again, if you look at go to any year, pick any year of Sports Illustrated, go to 1976, and Sports Illustrated would have produced, because they always produced a couple extras, about 50 to 55 issues that year. The average year, how many of those are really collectible long term? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe. So I think that it's easy to make the assumption if they were producing 52 weeks a year, there'd be more of them that are collectible every single year. I don't know that that's been proven out. As long as Sports Illustrated can put good athletes on the cover every month, you may get pretty close to the same number of collectible issues produced each year, even though it's only being done monthly.
Yeah, maybe we can argue that it's a bigger deal to make the cover these days.
It is a bigger deal to make the cover these days. Look, Josh Allen, top 5 quarterback in the NFL, still has never had his first Sports Illustrated cover yet. I mean, the guy, was this close to, being in the Super Bowl. I mean, the Bills have been right there for years. Still never had his first Sports Illustrated cover yet. So it's harder to do, and it makes those athletes more collectible when they do it.
Yeah, it's almost impossible to get on the cover now. Now you got 12 opportunities instead of 52. And, because it's monthly, you're not going to get on the cover with just a moment. If you had a big moment in a game, you were probably going to get on the weekly Sports Illustrated cover. But now, because they're going monthly, it's going to be a bigger picture type deal. I mean, there's tons of huge athletes out there right now that have not gotten a Sports Illustrated cover and probably won't, because of the way that has rolled out. But the hobby of graded sports magazines really has existed almost in its entirety in the era of monthly Sports Illustrated. Because Sports Illustrated switched to going monthly in, like, what was that, 2018, 2017?
It was 2020.
Okay.
So it was early. I believe it was early 2020. So we're coming up on almost 4 years now. So
Okay.
yeah, but you're exactly right. 90% of the people in this hobby have only been in this hobby since Sports Illustrated has been produced monthly.
Yeah. And so I think we're never going to have that aspect of the hobby where, you're getting a new pack and you're getting something new and it's a surprise. That's a comparative to sports cards that just doesn't exist in this hobby. I think that the larger appeal for the graded sports magazines is more of the historical and the previous. I don't personally find myself getting all that excited about the new covers that come out each month. I think that there's still an opportunity for there to be some excitement. There have been a handful here in the past couple of years that I thought were cool and I wanted to grab. I love what Slam's doing. I even love what PSA Magazine is doing with some of their cover variants. I mean, but for me, the appeal is more on the older stuff.
But Brad, I think you bring up a really good point there. I think that as you do look to ultra modern, newer issues, and Sports Illustrated not producing as many, not having as many must-have first covers, you are starting to look toward other publications, and I do it as well. The Cooper Flag issue from Slam magazine, I was all over that because I'm excited about this potential young basketball player out there. And I do think the PSA magazines are really, really interesting. I wish PSA would ship them with some minimal sort of protection, because every single one I've ever seen has been just absolutely beat to hell.
Slam as well.
And Slam, you're right, Mike. Slam's the same way, although Slam has gotten a little bit better, and Slam I can purchase at the newsstand. I don't know if I've ever seen PSA available at the newsstand. Maybe there is someplace somewhere where it is, but that just ships in this very thin see-through plastic. It's not even protection. It's just something they put the address label on, really, for the most part. And every time it shows up in my house, the first thing I do is check the spine, and it's beat up, and I'd be lucky if I get a 9 on it. But to your point, if you are interested in those sorts of modern athletes, the brand new athletes and that sort of stuff, I think that you are going to have to look towards some other publications. I think that's a good thing. I think that's good.
I think we're also talking about prospecting here versus, collectors' mindsets that are more interested in the history, right? And that's where Sports Illustrated shines.
Absolutely. So prospecting is never going to be in graded magazines what it is in sports cards. It's always going to be a small part of the hobby, which it is today.
So, Mike, I do think that the discussion we're having now transitions a little bit to our second topic, so we'll go ahead and roll into that one. Long-term collectibility of magazines, and the reason that this topic came to mind is a group chat that Jim and I are both in on Instagram. And one of the people in that chat was asking some questions about kind of the future of the hobby. And one specific comment, I screenshotted it here because I wanted to read it and kind of use this to spur our discussion. But he said,
send this back. You got it. Go for it.
Yeah, okay, thank you. He said, when people who grew up with magazines, and the ones that were buying and collecting them, whenever they're old and in retirement homes, will the younger generation care about magazines? And that's what got me thinking a little bit, and that's what I want to talk about. And Jim, I know you mentioned you had some thoughts on it, so go ahead and you start.
Yeah, and I could ramble about this forever. I think it's a valid question, but I don't think it's certainly not something that keeps me up at night or that worries me about it. Look, I think you can look at comparisons in other industries. Look at vinyl records. Vinyl records were produced forever, but they have been completely, made obsolete since the mid '80s and when CDs took over. Yet the collectibility of vinyl records has never been higher than what it is today. You've just got the very first company that started grading vinyl records. Taylor Swift just re-released her entire catalog in vinyl. So I think that, again, that question goes back to something I said earlier. It always seems to be these binary questions. Yes, no, black, white. All the answers, 99% of the time, are varying degrees and shades of gray. So yes, in 20 years from now, will there be, could we be in a situation where people didn't grow up with magazines and so that could be detrimental to the hobby? Yeah. Or it could be just like vinyl records where it's something retro and very cool, and all of a sudden a new generation is into it that they weren't into before. So I think it's an interesting question, but again, it's all these varying degrees of it. And I think that strong hobbies, which I think that while we've got a small hobby, it is a strong hobby, they find ways to manage that, and they find ways to deal with it. And I think that, the question comes down, and I see this so often, whether so I'll tell a story. So this is going back a couple of years ago. I was part of a roundtable, very large roundtable. It was about 10 or 12 of us, and it was organized by this guy, and it was sports cards, but he had seen my stuff on Twitter and that sort of stuff, and so he invited me to take place in it. And so it's me and 10 or 12 sports card guys, and the whole conversation all night long is about sports cards, and this was a long conversation. It was a couple hours long. And the host who liked what I did finally got to me and said, "Hey, I invited Jim here because he does these magazines and let's talk about it." And so I do my little spiel and introduce them to the hobby and that sort of thing. And I got what I get most of the time, which is 90% of them get defensive immediately, throw up walls. And I'm sure there are a ton of reasons for it. They've collected sports cards their entire life, and they're not open to new things, or they've got tens of thousands of dollars invested in sports cards, and they see magazines as a threat. But to a point, every single one of them sat there and told me, "You know what? This is dumb. This is stupid. I don't see why you would do this." And my response to that is, "Oh, you're right, because small little pieces of cardboard, that's not stupid at all." But I get where they're coming from on all of this. So it got so kind of contentious that toward the end, one of these guys was in my face, virtually on camera like this, going, "Look, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I don't know why you're wasting your time on this. If you think there's ever going to be a Sports Illustrated that sells for six figures, you're the biggest idiot I've ever seen." So I feel a little vindicated that this year we got our first six-figure Sports Illustrated sale. But I think that's what you see from a lot of this. And I see it from comic book guys too. Look, I'm in a big graded comic book Facebook group, almost 40,000 members. It's massive. Some guy there in the last week posted a picture of the 3 Taylor Swift Time magazines. People's heads exploded, lost their minds. You're an idiot. This is the dumbest thing I've ever. And he was all excited. He was like, "I can't wait to get these graded." And these people just tore into him. And so I think that you're going to see that when people are introduced into this hobby. Then you're going to see 10 or 15 or 20% of people that just think, "Man, this is cool." Like us, like the three of us that when we were, didn't take much convincing for us to sit here and go, "Wow, this is really, really cool." So I think we're always going to be battling against those people that for whatever reason, whether they've got a financial stake in their own vertical or they just aren't open to new things and new ideas and new collectibility. I think that you're always going to see people like that person in the group chat that are going to constantly be throwing up excuses and reasons as to why this hobby won't survive long term. And I think that I haven't come across one yet that I haven't been able to counter argue in a way that I think I've won. And I'll go back to that point. Yeah. Just because if Sports Illustrated ceased production tomorrow, is that good for the hobby? No. Does that mean the hobby is dead or has no long-term viability? Also no. There's tons of ways that it can be satisfied. The demand for new content can be satisfied out there through other publications, and Slam is doing a pretty good job of that, and PSA and their magazine, and there's other publications that are pretty interesting around those lines as well. So I think that if I were to look at this and say, in 20 years from now, do I think there'll be more people in this hobby, in 20 years from now than there are today? Yeah, I'd bet a lot of money on that. If there was something, if that was an option in my DraftKings app, yeah, I'd be putting some money on that. I'd buy that future all day long. And I think it's because, for all the reasons that we know, I think it's because of the history. It's because of the stories they tell. It's because these are a work of art. It's because they display so well, and it's because of the rarity of the vintage issues. I just, all of those things. I haven't seen another vertical that checks as many boxes as this one does. Graded VHS doesn't check that many boxes. Graded video games, sports cards, comic books, graded vinyl albums. Take your pick. Graded game tickets. None of them check all those boxes like graded magazines do. So I just think it's a really strong. I just think it's a really strong hobby, and the idea that it's moving beyond Sports Illustrated also really strong. Look, 95% of the hobby is still Sports Illustrated, but it's great to try and sample new stuff, and I love it when I see people get PSA magazine graded and Slam magazine graded and Time magazine with Taylor Swift. You better believe I'm getting a ton of those Taylor Swift Time magazines graded. Not only because I think she's amazing and this incredible pop culture phenomenon, and I think the value is going to go up on them. I just think they're pretty cool. There's 3 variants, checks a ton of boxes that I just talked about. So I think it's very healthy, and I think that there's I think it's unfortunate that so many people, when they're exposed to this, initially want to throw up all the reasons why it's dumb and stupid and won't work. And you know what? To be honest with you, graded comics were stupid. When people first started grading comics 30 years ago, the hobby thought that was stupid and was going to ruin the hobby. And it was stupid until it wasn't. And same thing with sports cards. Graded sports cards, I remember I collected before PSA existed. When the grading companies came around, that was stupid. It was going to ruin the hobby. And it was dumb until it wasn't dumb. And the same thing with graded game tickets. Graded game tickets were stupid until they weren't.
It solidifies the market, right? So instead of things being unpredictable, we know like what we see in front of us. We know a PSA 8 is worth this, and a PSA 10 is worth that. The CGC 8 is worth this, and a CGC 9.8 is worth that.
It's been proven.
Yes,
you're exactly right, Mike. It's been proven time and time again. Whenever there is a vertical, whenever a well-respected independent third party comes out and says, we're going to grade this, the hobby, the interest in that hobby explodes exponentially. And we saw it with Sports Illustrated. Look, Sports Illustrated collecting has been around for a long, long time. There have been people that have casually collected them, mostly autograph guys that have used Sports Illustrated as that medium to get their autograph. But there have been other collectors out there. The minute they got graded, it takes so much friction out of the marketplace. Takes all that friction out of the marketplace, and the hobby's just seen exponential growth ever since.
Yeah, it totally legitimizes whatever hobby it's introduced in. I see that question often. Once the people that experienced this player or that player or this era are gone, then all of a sudden it's going to poof and nobody's going to care. Is such crap. I think it's complete crap. I mean, what a baby? Nobody's seen nobody today. The kids today aren't like we haven't seen Babe Ruth play, or many haven't even seen Mickey Mantle play. Those cards are worth more than anything else, right? People love history, and people that are interested in today's game or today's, whatever it might be, the hobby, whatever it is now, they want to see where did it come from? What were the origins? What's the old versions of what it is today, and then there's interest that way. So I never put anything into that question, to be honest.
Yeah, and whenever that question was asked, do I think that anyone's going to care about magazines 20 years from now, whenever some of these younger kids, were not part of the group that we were, who had the subscription to, Sports Illustrated and that. And my response was similar to both of you. It's a very strong no. I don't think that the interest is going to go away, because first of all, I'm 33, and me and all my buddies, we had subscriptions in our household to Sports Illustrated growing up in the 90s and the early 2000s. And you know what? I'm hoping that I live another 40 plus years. So let's at least add 40 years or so where there should be some pre-existing nostalgia for people who actually, lived through and experienced the excitement of what Sports Illustrated somewhat used to be. But secondly, when you think about a VHS, Mike, or Jim, there's already, kids and generations growing up who don't know what a VHS is, because
100%.
it's pretty much gone away. Everyone still knows what a magazine is. I don't think we're going to get to a point where people look at magazines and they're like, what's that? I don't even know what that is. Okay, sure, maybe the nostalgia factor isn't quite as strong because they didn't have the subscription, but I think something that both of you touched on is the history's never going to go away.
Yeah.
The Sports Illustrated covers aren't just a VHS tape with a film rolled inside that could play a movie on a, obsolete device. The Sports Illustrated covers are literal historical timestamps of what happened. And that's never going to go away. That's never going to stop drawing interest, because it always will tell a story. And to me, Mike, you mentioned Babe Ruth and, Ty Cobb and whatever, these older, just legends. They're never going to go away. And, the Mickey Mantles and the Michael Jordans, their legends will carry on, and there's always going to be those Sports Illustrated covers to kind of memorialize that and create that time capsule. So, and it's also going to be sad. There may be a point 20 years from now where some kids growing up don't even know or remember what it is like to get a printed game ticket to a game. So like, game tickets and VHS, those are two things where I can legitimately see those things might just like disappear because they're not in use anymore. And maybe people are like, okay, well, I don't even know what that is. Magazines aren't going to disappear. People are always going to know what magazines are. And I think they're always going to recognize and appreciate the history specifically with some of these covers.
Bradley, to that point, there are still 1.9 million subscribers to Sports Illustrated.
Wow.
That's larger than almost any other magazine still. There's still almost 2 million people. They're still getting Sports Illustrated to their house every single month and that are coming in the mail. I mean, that's a monstrous number. So this idea that the magazine is done and kaput as far as, the modern issue goes and going forward, it's far from that. And by the way, the Sports Illustrated business has never been healthier. And I think I talked about this on that Junk Whack Heroes podcast I was on before last week. The venture capital firm that bought Sports Illustrated in 2019 didn't care about the magazine, didn't care about the website, wanted the brand name so they could license it. And they essentially have done a spectacular job of doing that and have turned around the business. It's likely that if Sports Illustrated wasn't sold to that venture capital company in 2019, that the magazine might have stopped being produced. But it's not, because that company found other ways to monetize that Sports Illustrated brand name. And the good news is they need to keep producing that magazine every single month to keep that licensing valuable in the marketplace.
So another question we got, Jim, was, do you guys think that Sport Magazine and Inside Sports magazines are undervalued? They have some very cool Michael Jordan covers.
I'm not a big sport magazine guy. I'm not a big Inside Sport magazine guy. 95% of what I do is Sports Illustrated. And when I go outside of Sports Illustrated, it's for very specific reasons. I like well-respected, well-known historical publications. Sports Illustrated, Time, Newsweek. That's about it. I do get into Slam magazine a little bit because I got some nostalgia for that from when I was, in the 90s and that sort of stuff. And that was peak NBA for me. And I was into Slam magazine. And I'll also go to Slam magazine, like I mentioned earlier, for the Cooper Flag issue, because I'd have no idea if this kid's ever going to get a Sports Illustrated cover, but he's already had his first Slam cover. And so that specific reason will bring me to some alternate publications. But when you go back historically, because Sport and Inside Sport aren't around anymore, I just haven't found a reason for me to be interested in them. That's just me personally. I know there's plenty of other people that are into sport, especially. There's certainly a market for it. But for me, there's nothing that Sport and Inside Sport does for me that I can't get somewhere else. I will say, other than the handful, like, so for example, I can get a Joe DiMaggio on Sport. Joe DiMaggio was never on Sports Illustrated. Jackie Robinson was never on Sports Illustrated. I think there are a handful of instances like that where sport is interesting to me. Again, back to the point where I can't get it from my main collectible publication.
And we touched on Sport Magazine, at least the vintage ones in a past episode, where I think we showed some of some of the highlights that would show like why it would be collectible to some people. And like you said, the Joe DiMaggio, covers, you can't really get that, plain days covers, at least for Sports Illustrated, and some others. I mean, I love the Ted Williams covers from the 40s and 50s as well, and there's some other ones too. And then there's a couple even modern ones, what we consider modern, like 80s and 70s, that are sprinkled in there. Jim, you and I even spoke once about Bo Jackson's first cover. How I showed you his first sport cover was actually pretty cool. As opposed to his Sports Illustrated covers, first covers, at least first cover. So I do think that personally, I really enjoy some of the old sport magazines.
Yeah, and don't let a lot of this is just personal opinion. So what I just said about that's not so much me speaking as to what the market says. The market says that sport's pretty interesting. It's just not something that. Look, I'm easily distracted. It takes all the fiber of my being not to get into comic books and sports cards again, and just to stay on this path that I'm on here. And it's true within the magazine path. It's hard for me to not just want to go and get into Nintendo Power and Sport and all these other publications that are out there in that group chat that we're in, Bradley. The one guy was sending pics of some sneaker magazines that he got graded, and I was like, had to clench my fists. No, Jim, that you're already overwhelmed with what you're doing now, so settle down, dude. But man, if you think it's cool, rock and roll. I love it.
I think I like the sport covers. It would be hard for me to say that I think they're undervalued, just because I think that it seems like they're easier to find in newsstand, especially some of those 50s and 60s. But I would describe them as underappreciated just because I think there are some sport covers that are just really cool and really beautiful shots. And even when you get into the 70s and 80s, those seem like they're harder to find, and they've got some really cool concepts with their covers. So I do like them, but yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to see like value and collectability ever reaching Sports Illustrated levels with the sport. And then you mentioned Inside Sports, some of those 90s or late 80s magazines. I think that anytime you got Michael Jordan on there, and if you could get like a 9.0 or higher, I think that's going to draw some interest. And even if it's like a total oddball magazine with Michael Jordan on the cover and you're able to get a 9.8, I think there's going to be some interest there. So once again, there's a lot of factors, and I do think it's fun sometimes to dabble into some of those different covers, and I think the extra variety is nice too to add on top of, so it's not just Sports Illustrated all the time. I put out the monthly videos, interesting sports magazine sales, and I intentionally try to find sales of magazine covers that I've never seen before, and that's a lot of fun for me. Is like, oh, look at this is a pretty neat looking cover of whoever, Michael Jordan or Magic Johnson, that I've never seen. And I think that adds a little bit of fun. And depending on the aesthetic of the cover and the year of the cover and who's on it, I definitely think there is some collectability to some of them, but it kind of all varies, like Jim was saying earlier.
I think, Bradley, you brought up a good point, because the guy's question was, are they underrated? And so if we were playing overrated, underrated, I would say that there are a handful, especially vintage issues of sport, I would say are slightly underrated. You know what? If I can get a Willie Mays first cover, I can get a Mickey Mantle, I can get a Joe DiMaggio first cover. I pressed one for a customer recently. It was the very first copy of Sport Magazine. Joe DiMaggio's on the cover. I've seen it sell before in a pretty decent grade for under $1,000. That's underrated for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think there are some ones, like we talked about, Mike, that first Bo Jackson cover. The first sport cover is much better than his first Sports Illustrated cover. Do you have, if there's specific reasons, and look beyond that? I've talked about this before. I had a big Twitter post about this recently, that Street and Smith's basketball annual, it was the 86-87 with Michael Jordan on the cover. It's the first time he was on a major publication wearing Air Jordan 1s. That's a great story. That's cool to me. I don't own any Street and Smith. I need to get my hands on a copy of that one for that specific reading, because the Air Jordan 1s are so prominently featured in that cover. And that's interesting. So have a reason why you're getting into some of these for anything you collect. But when you go outside of Sports Illustrated, which is such a big part of the hobby, be very intentional about it and have a reason as to why you go in that direction.
That's great advice, actually.
Jim, I think last question that I'm going to throw at you. Someone asked, is there any area of the hobby that you think could get popular? And they commented, I'm thinking tennis, just waiting for tennis to get popular again. What are your thoughts on that?
I have no idea. I loved tennis when I was a kid. I remember specifically because the French Open every year, when I was home for summer break, either whether that was the end of May or early June, very soon after that was always the French Open. And I used to watch the French Open all the time as a 10-year-old, 11-year-old watching the French Open. And I used to love tennis. The problem is there's no Americans that have won American men that have won a tennis Grand Slam in a long, long time. And I think that hurts the collectibility. Yeah. And if you're into tennis and you like, Nadal and Federer and all that sort of stuff, great. But as Americans, we tend to root for other Americans, and that's okay. That's fine. But the days of us having, Jimmy Connor and John McEnroe battling for Wimbledon are long, long gone. And even the days of Pete Sampras are long, long gone. And I wish it wasn't the case. And I hope someday tennis comes back, to the forefront of sports in this country again. But I'm not hopeful of it. Look, man, I've got big reservations about the future of golf. Tiger's days of actually winning look to be over. He's still going to be a draw, and he'll be a draw into the senior tour, but it's not going to drive the sport anymore. John Rahm signing with Liv and all the things with Liv and the PGA. Golf is lots of big question marks in golf. So I really, I wish they all were in stronger, healthier shape, but they're not. So that's kind of the reality on a lot of that. Let's be honest, baseball's not in that great of shape right now. The NBA is hanging on. I mean, let's be frank and honest about everything. Football rules the sports world in this country, and it has no sign of stopping or slowing down. In fact, it only looks like football's, fandom and passion in this country is only getting stronger, and it all comes at the suffering of the other sports, unfortunately. I wish hockey was in better shape. I was a huge hockey fan. I grew up in Chicago. I lived outside of Detroit, two of the best hockey cities in the country, and I love the Blackhawks. And I love seeing the Detroit Red Wings plays, and I went to a ton of hockey games. And man, I was way, way into hockey. And I hope Connor Bedard is everything that we think he is, and I hope he does for this sport what the sport needs, and that is just superstars. NBA's done a good job, and the NBA's had its problems, but the NBA's done a very good job of marketing superstars. I tune in because I want to see LeBron, and I want to see Jason Tatum, and I want to see all those superstars. And that's what's held the NBA together, and thank goodness for that, since Jordan retired. The other sports need to look at that, and they need to be marketing their young stars as strong as they can, because that's what's going to drive the sport forward. How'd I go from a question about tennis to all over the place on that? Yeah.
No, it's okay. He asked you about any other sports, so you're good.
I lament the decline of boxing. I've talked about this on my videos before. I was the biggest Tyson fan in the world. I was in high school when Tyson was, winning all, and we would all get together and we would all chip in $5 and buy the pay-per-view and watch every single one of those fights. And I've got these amazing memories with me and 15 or 20 of my buddies watching all of these fights. And there'd be big parties that we'd be at in college, and the fight would be on. These days are gone, man. And MMA, I try to get into UFC, and it's just not the same. It just is not the same, and it just doesn't recreate it. So I wish all of these other sports, I'm rooting for them. I'm cheering for them. I hope they raise their profile and can get more interest. But they're all battling that 800-pound gorilla that is the NFL, and the NFL is just, it's a machine. What it does, and it takes people's attention and doesn't give it back.
Just please don't let Sports Illustrated put pickleball on the cover, because then I'm not
gonna
be able to show my face for years if that happens. I'm a big tennis guy. So
but you know what, Bradley? I'd still buy that cover on speculation and get it graded just in case pickleball takes over the world in 20 years. I want to have the first Sports Illustrated pickleball cover. Yeah,
I'm sure plenty of people would. Heck, the way Sports Illustrated's gone, they may put pickleball on the cover.
They may put pickleball. I'm surprised. Actually, surprised pickleball hasn't made it to a cover yet. Yeah.
All right, Jim, did you have a slab or two that you wanted to share before we head out?
You know what? I never did grab one, Bradley. We talked about it before we went on the air, and I think that most people have seen them on my unboxing videos anyway. But since you said it, hold on, give me 10 seconds. I'll grab one.
I know Jim's always got something back there. He's got a stock.
Curious to hear what Jim's favorite edition for the year was.
All right. So I've talked about this one in other videos that I've done, and so this may be kind of a repeat to somebody, but I think that, Bradley, this issue really sums up so much of why you and I enjoy this hobby so much. So this is Del Crandall. This is Del Crandall's Sports Illustrated cover. It is from 1958. I don't even know what team Del Crandall played for. I think he might have been played for the Indians. Maybe.
I don't know either.
I don't know. Nobody's collecting Del Crandall. But what's awesome about this issue, and why we talk about what makes magazines so much better than cards and so much better than game tickets and all these other things, are the history and the stories within this. So why this issue is cool, if you're a golf fan, you know the Masters and you know Amen Corner. Amen Corner is this famous section of the Masters. It's part of the 11th, the 12th, and part of the 13th holes at the Masters. The first time the words Amen Corner were ever used, the guy who coined the phrase was in this issue of Sports Illustrated. And fortunately, CGC put that data and information on the slab. And it says, Amen Corner, first used in print by Herbert W. Wind, who was the writer of the article. That's why I love these. It's only at 4.5, which, by the way, I've got a better one. I found a better newsstand copy that should be closer to an 8 that I'm hopefully going to be getting graded here pretty soon. But this is why we love this. Is why, Bradley, you're so into the history part of it, and I'm so into the history and stories part of it. The issue is not collectible with Del Crandall on the cover. The fact that this is the issue where the first time anyone ever mentioned the term Amen Corner, all of a sudden, man, that becomes super cool. And that becomes a great story to tell. As I know you guys are going to keep talking, but as I leave this portion of the show, keep that in mind. That's why so many of us love this hobby. It is for the stories. It's for the history. It's the fact that we can tell that history on the slab. I'll give PSA credit when they went into grading game tickets. They were very smart to make sure that they left a little bit of information so that they could say right there on the slab what story was being told. Getting those stories told on the slabs of these magazines is really important because it's all right there.
Jim, I'm really glad that you showed that one, because I think that we as collectors and as a base, we need to be more aware of some of those opportunities, for notations and for key issues, because we talk a lot about notating first covers and variants. Yep. But there's a lot of really cool stuff that happen inside these magazines that we can ask CGC to notate, and that could add a little bit of collectability to certain issues. I mean, we talk all the time about how the covers themselves are so historical and time capsules. Well, there's a heck of a lot of history going on inside the pages too. And I've shared some of the books that I've read, like the franchise and
Yep.
the history of the sports. There's a lot of different instances of covers over the 70 plus year or whatever history of Sports Illustrated, where there's cool stuff just like that. That's really cool that you found that and you were aware of that. That was the first time that the Amen Corner was mentioned. There's lots of similar instances that we as collectors could, identify and hopefully get CGC to notate on the label. And I think that could open up a whole new realm of kind of fun type of hunting and just a new little twist into the hobby that I think adds collectability, and like I said, just kind of makes it more fun.
I think you're exactly right. You go ahead, Mike, and then I'll follow up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you imagine what it might do for the first Isaiah cover if it also denoted on the slab that it was MJ's first appearance inside?
It absolutely should say that.
All we've got to do is request it, or I should say, that's the first step. The first step of what we've got to do is, and look, I get, I want this hobby to be 10 years forward from where it is, and it's going to take time, and we've got to do it. And we've had a hard time just getting CGC to denote first covers and variants and all that sort of stuff. But I do think that is, the next 2, 3, or 4 steps of where this hobby is going, is paying more attention to what's on the inside. Certainly has always been what's driven comic books. Iron Man might not be on the cover, and that's a bad example because he was on the cover, but just because it wasn't Iron Man on the cover, his origin story is being told on the inside, and that makes it more collectible. There was somebody in our Facebook group recently that pointed out a copy of Sports Illustrated that was the first time that famous Andre the Giant photo of him holding a beer can appeared. I love goofy, oddball stuff like that. If you've got something like that, if you've discovered it, make that request to CGC when you get it graded. And if they don't do it, submit another one and make that request again and do it again and do it again. And the more times we do it, the more they'll start showing up, because I think you're right, Brad. I think that's next level for this hobby, is the collectability beyond the cover.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mike, I heard you mention while Jim went to grab his magazine that you really wanted to hear what Jim's best pickups were of 2023. So Jim, we're ending on that topic. We're going to talk about a couple of our best pickups, but does anything jump to your mind? I know I'm putting you on the spot here because we didn't give you warning about this, but is there any particular pickup this past year that you think is especially noteworthy?
Just for me personally?
Yeah, for you personally.
You know what? This one was good. This Del Crandall, because this is a tough one to find in newsstand. Just because it doesn't have any collectability on the surface. That was one from this year. That was one that I had been hunting for and looking for a long time. I did get my first Tiger Woods Time magazine Canadian variant, because he appeared on the Canadian cover of Time before he appeared on the US version of Time. That's one that I hunted for a long time. What else did I get this year? I also got my first Signature Series issues this year.
Yeah.
And so you've seen some of these on my videos. I'd say so. I got 3 wrestling ones, four, 3 of Lex Luger and 1 of Ron Simmons that were all Signature Series that I was in person. And then probably my best get, and again, I still don't think anybody cares about this but me, but I still love it, is that Mark McGwire 70th home run Sports Illustrated that I got Signature Series done by Todd McFarlane, who of course is the guy that paid $3 million for the 70th home run ball. That was probably my best get of 2023, just because it is so goofy and so weird, and there's only one of them, and I love that sort of stuff.
I like what Scotty O just said in the comments over here. I guess Brad, you do too. That would be great if CGC would do on-site autograph, authentication, right? Being there for the Gold Series for sports stars. That seems like a pretty simple bridge there too. That should be in your next wish list, bro. I think that
Oh, you're right. Yeah, should have put that on my wish list.
It would be awesome. I do not have my hopes up on that, and I know a lot of the internal workings of CGC. They're doing fewer comic book in-persons than they've ever done since they started Signature Series. So to expect them to, they've slimmed the comic books in-persons way down. They do way more in-house signings. So they go to far fewer Comic Cons and comic book shows than they've ever gone to with Signature Series. To expect them to all of a sudden switch and go into growth mode and to start going to sporting events is different. It would be a Herculean ask, but hey, fingers crossed, and maybe Santa will bring us a gift in 2024.
Either that or just have some authenticators on hand so they can change the game that way.
Yeah, and again, that's tough too. Look, hey, I've been trying for 3 years to become a Signature Series facilitator. I'm a CGC authorized dealer. I check all the boxes. I know I got lots of great relationships at CGC. They've got no interest in making me a Signature Series facilitator.
You got my vote, Jim.
Yeah, okay. That's 2 of us. I don't know how many I need, but maybe I'll pretend like I'm running for election like everybody else in 24 and run to be a Signature Series facilitator.
All right. Well, Mike and I are gonna wrap up on a couple little things here, but Jim, we're gonna let you go. I so greatly appreciate you joining us tonight. I think we had some really good discussion, and always enjoy my time getting to chat with you about the hobby, and just thank you again for all that you do and all your videos and all your education and leading the groups and social media. Greatly appreciated.
Yeah, Brad speaks for me as well, Jim.
Well, thanks, guys. And let me leave on this. I want to say how much I appreciate what you guys do. I am a huge supporter of other content creators in this hobby, and Bradley, you've certainly been leading the charge as far as that goes here. And Mike, I'm glad that you guys have been doing these videos on a consistent and regular basis. It's difficult to be a content creator. You've got to create content on your topic consistently and regularly, and that's really difficult with all of us in our busy lives. So I want to say I really appreciate what you guys do in doing these videos and the social media that you create. And there's a handful of others out there that are starting to step up and do more and more of it. If you're watching this and you're interested in being a content creator and don't know where to start, please reach out to me. I am the biggest cheerleader for this hobby. I think the more of us that get into the content creation game, the better. And I'm happy to support any and all of you that are interested in doing that. So if that's something that anybody watching this is interested in, I may not know much about it, but I'll share with you everything I know about it. So thanks very much to both you, Bradley, and to you, Mike, for doing these videos so consistently and regularly. And I'm a big fan and watch them every single time.
Appreciate
Thanks
that.
so much, Jim.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, guys. Thanks. Appreciate it. Have a good New Year's.
Thanks.
See you, Jim.
Too.
All right, man. That's awesome to have the GOAT on with us tonight.
Oh yeah. We've been wanting to have Jim join us for quite a while.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see here. So after all that excitement, I need to switch over here. We're gonna have to delve into a little bit of negativity here for a moment.
Yeah.
we definitely need to at least touch on what's been going on the comic side with CGC and some stuff that can certainly have an effect on us and possibly could already have had an effect on us and we might not even be aware of it. Let's see here. Let me stop my share because actually I don't even think I am sharing. Mike, you can take the screen back because I know you said that you had a couple visuals you had prepared.
Yeah. Let's see, let's go with this. Okay, so there's a handful of comics that have kind of come to the forefront that have all come from, at least at this point, from the same seller on eBay. There's a couple different situations going on here, but it seems as though at least this one seller has found ways to kind of cheat the system a little bit by taking advantage of reholderings. This right here is Amazing Spider-Man number 252, 9.8, and this is what it ended up in. And the big difference here between the two is that in the label it says Mark's Jewelers insert. Now it's a big deal because Mark Jewelers inserts takes a book from that would be otherwise $1,200 or $1,500 to about $15,000. So, this is one instance in which I guess what was it that he had? I think he had a version that was Mark's Jewelers, and then he switched it out. Is what he did. So he had one that had a Mark's Jewelers already, took it out, regraded it, and he took one that did not, put it into the slab, and said, "Hey, I need a reholder." So that's what happens there. Now he has two Mark's Jewelers that are worth about 15K each, and one of them is worth a tenth of that. Let's see. So that is one of the scenarios that he has taken advantage of. Another one is with this Hulk 181, which is a famous issue with Wolverine's first appearance. And what he did here is he bought an issue that was a qualified grade, an 8.5, because it's missing a page that has, I guess, a stamp in there that's like common to be ripped out because you can redeem it for something. And that's where all these qualified issues are coming up as. So he was able to get a qualified issue into a regular slab and then get that one reholdered, and then he ends up with a free Hulk 181 that does not have that missing and just gets that one graded again. There is instances, I believe, with this one in particular, where some of the investigators have found, investigators meaning like people like, just in the hobby.
Internet sleuths.
It's found that. So this issue has the 40003 certification number here. And this one also has that same certification number.
Yeah.
So if you were to look at the actual issues, you'll see that there's a lot of little telltales that I guess speak to it being the same issue. This one has I think it has a little thing in the corner here, like a little fold here, and the new issue also does. It's hard to see it there, but it has like these characteristics that are the same. Then there's another one here where he used the same issue again with a qualified grade. What's believed to have happened with this one is this magnifying thing is not working that well. Is that it was married with an internal copy that didn't have that page taken out. It didn't have that redemption thing taken out. So here, this is has characteristics that are pretty easy to see. There's like ticks here and some marks there, and this new one shares some of those identifiers as well. So the bigger thing here is that it's, the integrity's been infiltrated, right? So we don't know how pervasive this is. This is a scary thing for the comic world. I think that it makes sense at this point for CGC to try to do their diligence and see if they can accumulate as much information as possible, and maybe identify as many of these comics as possible, as which ones have been compromised. They know the person, the person that account that this is from, and they can start to follow the trail that way, and hopefully come up with some sort of comprehensive list. Based or sports cards rather have gone through this in more than a few occasions, unfortunately, and things like Blowout Forum. There's watchdogs that have kind of put together their own lists, things to look out for. Usually, there's been a lot of instances where there's been counterfeits that have found their way into slabs or swatches and pieces of jersey that have been manipulated and that sort of thing in cards. And there's lists that exist in forums that will actually speak to some of these have been altered or manipulated. So it's really unfortunate. It was only a matter of time for this to be found. We don't know how far back this goes, how many years. It could be, many, many years. And that could account for many, many comic books, unfortunately. And the way, the reason that this obviously affects us is we also use CGC servers for our magazines. We don't want this to infiltrate our hobby if we can help it. So that's sort of a background on this. Brad, feel free to fill in any gaps or articulate something that I may have not have done as well.
Yeah, I mean, this was kind of all the rage on all the comic content channels and message boards last week. And when it first came out, it took me a couple times through to fully understand and grasp what was happening here. But essentially, I mean, yeah, there's one specific seller that they found that was basically gaming the system. They were specifically gaming the reholdering process and using it to profit massively and deceive people. And so, basically what they were doing was they would buy two copies of a key book, such as this Hulk, and I'm by no means an expert on comics, but this Hulk book right here, like for example, they would buy a Hulk 9.0. Okay, and then they would then buy a Hulk 8.5 restored. All right, so obviously there's a huge value difference between those. What they would then do is somehow they would crack the case just enough. Well, they would crack the case on the 9.0, totally pull that book out. And then they would crack the CGC 8.5 restore. They would take that out and they would slide it into the 9.0 case. So obviously they're not fully cracking it. They're cracking it just enough to where they can swap a book in and out. And so then they would take that the 8.5 restored that they've now slid into the 9.0 label, and they would send that to CGC to be reholdered. And CGC would then give them a brand new slab with a 9.0, but little did CGC realize that inside of that slab and it's actually an 8.5 restored book that's missing a page, like you said, Jim. So it's not technically worth nearly as much as it appears to look on the surface. And so that seller was then able to sell that new 9.0 slab, which actually has a deceiving 8.5 restored inside of it. They were able to sell that for quite a bit of money, basically make most of their money back. And then they've still got a legitimate 9.0 condition magazine or comic left that they can send that back in to be graded. Of course, they're going to hope that it comes back a 9.0 again, but honestly, even if it doesn't matter, because then they can resell that one and make a pretty significant profit. And the reason or the way that people discovered this is like you showed, both of those slabs were having the exact same cert number because when you send one in to be reholdered, it still keeps the same cert number. And so people noticed that, wait a minute, these two sales that happened only a couple months apart, they show the exact same cert number, but when you actually looked at the comics inside the case, you could tell by looking at the spine ticks and the different errors, the creases, that they weren't the actual same book. And that's how people discovered that this kind of scam was taking place. And once again, it was identified that one seller in particular was doing this, but it raises questions about how long has this been happening and have others been doing it, and obviously became a major concern for people in the comics hobby. And so then that obviously translates to us by asking, is this something that could have been happening on, like the CGC Sports Illustrated side of things or with sports magazines? And I would hope not, because the volume definitely is not there right now that it is with comics. But it is possible, and it's really concerning, and it's something that I know a lot of comics people are wanting CGC to address, and I don't think that they have yet, to my knowledge. But it's really unfortunate to me because, Mike, I know when you and I were talking about last week, one comment I made was, I love the reholdering process, and I love how if I have a broken slab, let's say I got an issue and I got a really good grade that I'm really happy with. Well, in sports cards, if you send in a slab to be reslabbed because maybe the slab cracked or whatever, that card's getting totally regraded. And you are not guaranteed to get back the same grade. Well, CGC has made it pretty clear on their verbiage that um, if you send in a slab for reholder, you're going to get the same grade unless it's obvious that the magazine was damaged, unless it clearly is no longer in the same condition it was before. And I like that, because also you think about up until 9 months ago when CGC had the old slabs, those old slabs were junk. They were really weak. So I've got a bunch of older slabs, really nice magazines that I have sent in and that I want to continue sending in to get reslabbed in the new holder, but I don't want to be fearful that I'm going to get a lower grade. And that's currently possible. But because of this scam, it makes you wonder if now CGC is going to totally change their process, because that is one of the couple solutions that I've thought of, is that, hey, you know what? From now on, any reholdering is just going to have to involve a total regrading of the magazine that you send in.
Yeah, and if they do that, maybe they change up their label slightly to show like this is the before and after of that era, because then we'll know going forward this is a post, that scenario
Yeah.
time. You also gave another suggestion last time we talked about that I thought was actually really good, and that's the inner sleeve having some, having the cert number on there, whether it be very small or an invisible ink of some sort, maybe something like that. I think that's a wonderful idea, and that's not going to make it foolproof, but it would help tremendously for sure.
It would
So
help a
that's
lot.
one idea.
Yeah, it would help a lot, because as someone who's cracked quite a few magazines now,
Yeah,
the outer plastic case is pretty easy to crack and get into, and I could definitely see how someone could manipulate that to where they crack it just enough to where they can get a magazine out and put a new one in. But the inner well, kind of the inner, like almost laminated case that's within that plastic, that would be almost impossible in my opinion. I don't want to say 100% impossible, because unfortunately scammers go to great lengths, but
yeah,
I don't even see how someone could manipulate that and get the magazine out of that without it being detected. So if CGC was able to, like you said, somehow print the cert number also on that inner well, or some sort of unique identifier that's also on the inner well, then that would, I feel like, really deter and prevent what's happening here, without
yeah,
having to get rid of the current reholding process, which, like I said, I love. I love that I can just send in and get a broken slab fixed without being fearful of receiving a different grade.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's understandable. My vote is for the cert number on the inner well idea that you had. But we'll see how they respond to this. First they have to come out and have a response at all. and then we got to see like what it is that they plan to do going forward. So I hope that this is resolved in some way. With the cards, I can't say that it's always really been resolved. Sometimes we just have to keep march forward and understand that there's some of this that is infiltrated the hobby, but the more you can do to minimize it, the better. And if there is some sort of comprehensive list that is shared, that would be tremendous. I really hope that that comes out.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, this is really disappointing. It's not surprising to me, but it's disappointing that people would game the system like this. But does this type of activity deter my collecting whatsoever? And the answer to that is absolutely no. This does not deter me or change my opinion at all. I hope that CGC can address it and get it taken care of moving forward. I also, maybe I'm naive, but I don't feel like it's as likely that something like this has been happening on the magazine side as
Yeah,
it
I
is
don't think so
likely it's
either.
been happening on comics.
Yeah, yeah, I don't think so either. And maybe it's some to oddly a blessing in disguise. As this hobby of ours is still in its fledgling state, that this is happening to CGC, so they can put in the precautions for us before it happened.
Yeah. So anyway, just thought that we needed to at least touch on that and let people know what's going on there. Hopefully it doesn't affect our side of things too much. Okay. We've obviously gone really long, our longest episode so far, but I kind of knew that would probably happen, and I'm not too concerned that happened because it was so great to have Jim on with us. But Mike, are you good finishing out with our top
Yeah,
pickups of the year?
yeah. So as far as pickups that are not raw, um, I have a few here that I was just going to share real quick. So Barry Sanders is by far my favorite football player of all time, and I was happy to add this one to my collection. I got this from a fellow collector, Chris, who was great on selling that to me. I also was able to pick up Larry Bird first cover this year, and that's a classic issue. It's always great to have that in the collection.
Awesome
This
issue.
is one that I just always fell in love with. This cover. It's just so dramatic. We touched on this one as our favorite covers in the past. So I was able to snag this, and there's quite a, this one's really tough. There's not that many of these available. So I was really glad to add this one. And it really is beautiful in person. And of course, I was able to add um, another. I actually have two of these, but this one's a little bit nicer cover, a little bit crisper than my other one, MJ first cover. So yeah, these are a few of my favorite pickups from this past year.
Hey, pretty good year whenever you can add a Bird and a Michael Jordan first cover. I mean, those are some grails in the hobby.
Yeah, yeah, those are a lot of fun.
So I have a few I want to share. I don't have visuals, but I just thought I would tell the stories on a couple of my best pickups this year. So first off, I ran across a Facebook marketplace listing several months back. Actually just got these I just got these back graded, and it's on an upcoming reveal video. But the marketplace ad, all it advertised was that it was like a 2002 NFL draft like program or guide. Like, it wasn't even a magazine, it was literally just a piece of paper that had the itinerary printed on it for the 2002, actually I think it was 2000, whatever Tom Brady's rookie year was, NFL draft. I think it was 2000. And so I look at this listing, and for whatever reason, I decide to scroll through the other pictures because it did say Tom Brady's name in the title. And in not the cover picture, but once I started scrolling through a couple other photos, the listing included a photo of a folder, and on the inside of the folder was a newsstand copy of Tom Brady's first Sports Illustrated cover. And it looked to be in really good condition. So I'm like, oh, shoot, I got to buy this just, in case. I mean, I think the listing was for $50. So I bought this for $50 thinking, okay, I think I'm getting a Tom Brady newsstand out of this deal. It arrives, I open the folder, there's the one-page itinerary of the draft that I do not care about. And not only is there one Tom Brady first cover newsstand, there are
Amazing.
two side by side near mint Tom Brady first covers, both of which I sent in to be graded, both of which I received back recently. I think one got a 9.0 and one got a 9.4.
Wow.
And like I said, got those for a combined $50. So that was an awesome pickup. Another one, and I'm coming at this topic not so much from like, oh, these were like the biggest magazines I added, but these are some of my what I would consider coolest finds, or coolest stories this year. I got a Johnny Unitas first cover that I found on Craigslist, and the guy was selling it was basically just all Johnny Unitas memorabilia. He had like a signed football, and he had a signed subscription copy of Johnny Unitas first cover, and he had several other things, and he itemized them all like in the description. But I noticed in the picture that there was another Johnny Unitas first cover, that he didn't list in the description, and that looked to me like it might be a newsstand. It was just kind of off to the side behind some of the other things. So I messaged him and asked him about it, and he's like, "Well, that one's not autographed, right?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, it doesn't matter. I'm just interested in it because it doesn't have a label on it." And so I ended up buying it. It was indeed a newsstand copy of Johnny Unitas first cover from 1959, and we negotiated. I think I bought it once again for like right around $50. So that was a great one because that cover is almost impossible to find in newsstand. Um, Came across, here's a third one. I came across I always have a saved search on eBay for Yadier Molina's first Sports Illustrated cover because he's one of my personal favorites. That's a really tough cover to find, a 1 out of 4 variant. And so I got a hit on that one day on eBay on that search, and it pulls up this seller who, if you've been on eBay a lot, Mike, I'm sure you've seen this, but you'll sometimes find people who have like there'll be a drop down with a list. Like sometimes people do this with like checklists. If you have a full set of sports cards, like they might say number one, Michael Jordan, number two, or whatever. And you can hit a drop down and see what all is still available, and they'll have individual prices. Well, this guy had a list of like 180 St. Louis Cardinals magazines, and a lot of them were like older game programs, and like literal like Cardinals magazines is just like a local publication they sell in the stadium, like stuff that wasn't ultra collectible. But I got to the very bottom, he had a bunch of Sports Illustrateds, and I got a Jim Edmonds first cover, Albert Pujols first cover, a Yadier Molina first cover, and they were all in mint condition. The Edmonds first cover got a 9.8. The Yadier Molina got a 9.6, which is the highest copy in the world. And then the Pujols got a 9.8. And
That's
I
great.
paid like $4 for each of those for each of those magazines. So that was a pretty awesome pickup. Um, of course, let me grab this one real quick. I knew I had this one sitting right here, but one of my coolest that I've shared on my channel before was my Tom Brady Sports Illustrated Mexico first cover that I literally found on a Spanish marketplace. I think it was called Mercado Libre. I found this on Mercado Libre, and it wouldn't even let me make an account because I didn't live in one of the one of the eligible countries. So I like found the seller's name, and I Googled it, and I found that he had a Facebook
There you
page. I
go.
messaged him on Facebook page. I messaged him on his Facebook, and was able to track down this Tom
What would
Brady.
you what
Go
would you
ahead.
have done if you couldn't find him elsewhere? Would you have made an account somehow? Would you try to find somebody in Mexico to open an
Yeah,
account?
my next plan was I do have a coworker who I wouldn't even say I'm friends with him, but a coworker who retired like 3 years ago, and I know that he owns a house in Mexico that he spends like 6 months of the year down there. So my next step was I was gonna contact him and be like, listen, can you buy this for me and get it to me somehow? And he probably would have thought I was crazy, and I don't even know if he would have done it, but no, thankfully the Facebook worked. So
Yeah.
that was a cool one. I think I bought like 10 SI Mexico's for a total of like $250, and this was the biggest one in there. And actually, I've already sold all of them except this one and one other. I sold all of the others in a lot for like $250. So I made my money back,
Great.
plus get to keep this and then have one other one on eBay still.
That's amazing.
And then the last one that I want to share, this was probably my coolest. Let's see, I got this right here. Also had a video about this, but Mickey Mantle first cover. Saw a copy on Facebook that I bought. It was a 6.5 newsstand. Um, I bought it for $3,000, which was a really, really big deal for me. I've never spent anywhere close to that on any other magazine, but I felt like it was something that I could improve. And so I got the 6.5. I cracked it, which was super nerve-wracking. I cleaned it, I pressed it, and got it back as an 8.0. So that was probably my biggest pickup of the year. But I just thought sometimes I like hearing the people's stories of how they track these things down, because I try to tell people, people ask a lot like, oh, where do you get these? eBay is still the biggest, but sometimes you got to be a little bit savvy and you got to think a little bit outside the box to track some of these gems down.
Yeah, I've yet to really have a big hit outside of like the normal channels, but I do still try to look in those places.
So, all right.
All right. So been a
One out.
great first year, Brad. I guess technically it's been a little less than a year, but it's been a lot of fun this year.
Oh yeah, for the Slabs Mags and Slabs podcast, 10 episodes in our first year. Awesome participation in the chat tonight. The chat was strolling all night long. I know we asked some of those questions early on, but there've been tons and tons of comments that I really have just kind of tried to scan as they were coming through. So thanks so much to everybody for joining in and participating tonight. That was awesome.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate that.
All right, we will try to get back together here in a couple weeks or so with a new episode, and this video will be posted on my channel here in 2 or 3 days. And thanks again so much, everybody, for watching. We will talk to you soon, and thank you, Jim, for joining us tonight. You're the man.
Thank you, Jim. Also, if you want to listen to this on your way to work or while you're working out, this will also be an audio podcast in between the time that this is up back on the channel, the YouTube channel. So you can find us on the audio podcast as well.
There you
Thanks
go.
for everything, guys.
All right. Good night.